What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Cody here, and also joining me, good friend of the show, Alex from Hail Mary Sports. Alex, we are officially 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. It is about time that we are almost here. Only a couple more weeks of all this speculation, all these mock drafts, all these hot takes, everything and anything in between. How are you feeling, man? How are you doing? And just anything and everything with all this stuff, NFL draft right now.
So it's kind of hard to believe that it's 2 weeks away since obviously my channel works year round on the draft. It's all coming to an end. So it's really exciting. It's a little bit scary that it's just come this quickly, but I mean, the draft is awesome. And I'm so excited to see all the things that we never expected come into play, different trades come in. And, this is going to be a fun day. So we're going to talk about the first 2 days of the draft for the Colts. So it's going to be very exciting because there's a lot of really good players that might be slipping because maybe there's too much positional depth or maybe there's just more scheme specific. So it's going to be exciting to see where players fall.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm really excited to see. I mean, we all presume, and I think it's a good majority. There's like a 98% chance the Colts take one of the top 4 quarterbacks here in the NFL draft, sitting there at pick number 4 right now. Again, it will be interesting to monitor, what happens in the first 2 picks. There's been a lot of rumors floating around about Bryce Young potentially to Carolina.
Yep.
You wonder how much would that shake up if, say Houston goes and takes Will Anderson there at 2. Like, how much does that shake up that number 3 pick? Or does Arizona not want to risk it? It's just all these questions that you have regarding the quarterbacks right now. So it'll be interesting for sure. I think we're pretty much all in agreement that the only way the Colts should be trading is if they're trading up to number 3 with Arizona. I don't think there's really any scenario where we see the Colts, potentially trading down and trying to acquire more picks and stuff like that, at least not in the first round. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. And if you think, there's been rumors like the Arizona's received at least 6 different teams that have been interested in trading up. Do you think Indianapolis should be a part of that? Or do you think maybe they should just be okay sitting there at number 4, say that scenario plays out, and only one quarterback is off the board by the time the number 3 pick comes around?
So it just really depends on how much you like the other quarterbacks in the class. Like, how comfortable are you with getting the sloppy seconds if you don't have the guts to move up? And that's just going to really come down to the evaluations. It really comes down to each team. Obviously, you see on Twitter, there's people who think AR is the best guy. There's people who think Will Levis might be the best guy. You can see people who think Bryce, majority, and then CJ. So everybody has different opinions. And if the Colts are diehard fans of Will Levis, which I don't think would be the best move, but, who am I? Then you'd be comfortable sitting there, save your draft capital, be able to get both quality and quantity based on the guys that you want. But it's tough. It really comes down to the evaluation. I'd move up, but at the end of the day, there's another person sitting in the GM spot.
Yeah. Now, here's my thing, man. With Will Anderson sitting there, say it does play out quarterback. Let's just go with this scenario really fast. Anderson's still there, but Arizona has a choice, right? They can either trade up with Indianapolis or trade up with another team, knowing that a division rival is sitting there right behind Indy at 5. Like, are they willing? And if you're sitting there in Arizona's shoes, are you okay with potentially giving and gift wrapping Will Anderson to your division rival Seattle Seahawks? What are your thoughts on that, man?
That's the question, because there's also rumors that they like Tyree Wilson more as a 2-gap defender, which I think he fits Gannon's system better. But at the end of the day, the best player is the best player, and I think Will Anderson is the best by far. It's a very, very good question to ask because it's not something you really think about. When you trade out, you're going to get significant draft capital, but there are ramifications like letting Will Anderson fall to 5. So it's a tough call. If I'm the Cardinals, I think that I would be willing to move out for the right team. I think Tennessee, if I'm getting a future first from them, at least maybe multiple future first, I'm hitting that yes button right away. I don't care if I have to see Will Anderson a billion times a year. I'm probably going to have 2 top 5 picks in the next year. One of them is going to be Caleb Williams. And then, if Kyler doesn't want to stay. But you got Joe Alt, Marvin Harrison, Caleb Williams. Then I think that's worth it. I think it's a good price to pay. But you're rolling the dice on that one.
Yeah. Now, do you see a scenario, say they stay there at 3, say Anderson gets taken there at 2. Do you see a scenario if indeed they do like a player like Tyree Wilson, a scenario where they do stay at 3 as well, and they don't trade out despite the teams that might want to give them some draft capital just because edge rush is a premium position, and there are going to be at least two guys there, if not more, that are going to be available for the taking there at 3. So, I mean, it's really, I'm just going to be interested to see what happens there in terms of that scenario. I think that's unlikely, but like, what are your thoughts? Like, could you see that happening?
Yeah, I do. Like, so there are obviously the talk about how CJ Stroud's agent is part of the same organization that, Deshaun Watson is. CJ literally said, I model my game after Deshaun Watson. So there could be some uneasiness between the two.
Sure.
So there is that possibility where maybe they're like, well, we don't want someone who doesn't want us. We're going to get the best player available, and then we're going to get Caleb Williams, Drake May next year. I think that's a wise decision if your job's intact. The question is, how intact is your job? But at the same time, you really have to evaluate, if you're the Cardinals and that happens, you have to evaluate, well, we love Tyree Wilson. Who's our next best guy who fits that mold? Let's just say it's Miles Murphy, because he pretty much tested the same as Travon Walker, except for the 3-cone. Then you have to say, okay, well, I'm being able to move back and get 90% of what I get with Tyree Wilson, and then I get future firsts. It really depends on the package that you get, because you are also giving Tyree Wilson probably to the Seahawks. So it's a lot of variables that you have to weigh in the situation.
And also, I do wonder, is it just Arizona trying to bait Indianapolis to giving them more, right? Trying to be like, hey, we got all these offers. You want to get a better offer than us? And maybe they don't take it, but like maybe they're just trying to like say, hey, the best case scenario is if Arizona gets what they feel like they need, and then Indy ensures that, one of those top 3 quarterbacks is going to be there for the taking.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that makes the most sense, and that's like the biggest win-win for each side. But, knowing Chris Ballard and knowing how much he values those picks, I don't see a scenario where maybe like if Arizona has this huge high demand where they're asking for, future first or something crazy like that. I don't see a scenario, man, where Chris Ballard and the Colts go for that.
I know. It's tough. It's really tough because, again, it's not just like I have to pay whatever the chart says I have to pay. You have to add on to it because there's all these competing offers. So it's a really big roll of the dice, but at the same time, do you want to roll the dice on the most valuable position in the NFL? And that's the quarterback spot. That's a tough one.
Absolutely. So one question here just about the quarterback position, because we could talk about if Will Anderson is there at 4 somehow, like would Chris Ballard draft him? I think you have to draft a quarterback. I think that's just what you got to do. But my question for you is, with what Shane Steichen has worked with, the different types of players, there's not like a set quarterback that he's worked with that like he's just had success with. He's had success with Phillip Rivers. He's had success with Herbert, and most recently with Jalen Hurts. But saying that, knowing what Steichen has been able to get out of these young quarterbacks the last 2 stops he's been at, what do you think in terms of the quarterback makes the most sense for Shane Steichen sitting there at 4? Say a couple of those top guys are still available, or if the Colts trade up to 3 and some of these quarterbacks are available, like who makes the most sense for Shane Steichen in this Colts offense and what they're going to try to do with this new system they're implementing in Indy right now?
So the beautiful thing about Steichen is the fact that he's had a very solid resume with different players. So he has a very strong foundation and is shown to be able to improve, or at least make them appear improved with their gameplay. So for me, I personally want to go for as high of a ceiling as possible if I know that my coach is comfortable coaching somebody who has a lower floor and needs that development. We saw it with Jalen Hurts. He wasn't a polished passer. He had some very good ability with his legs. Obviously, I think AR is very similar to that with more upside. I think Anthony Richardson also has an amazing work ethic. You see in the offseason, he's working on his mechanics. Similar to Josh Allen, but I'm going to say that's an exception, not the rule. Kind of like Trey Lance. But for me, I think Anthony Richardson's the best choice. If CJ Stroud's there, that's the safest choice. And CJ does have something he needs to unlock a little bit more, and that's his legs. And we saw in the Georgia game, he was able to unlock that ability and did a very, very solid performance. So I think that you're comfortable going any route, even Will Levis. I mean, Phillip Rivers was pretty much a wild, like a loose cannon for the latter part of his career anyway. So he has comfortability with that. And for me, I think that'd be perfectly fine with that situation.
Yeah, so you would go probably more Anthony Richardson, the higher ceiling type of guy. Like, would you say he's like the best fit for what the Colts are trying to do right now? Or would you say there's another quarterback that's maybe a better fit for what Indy's trying to do? I know he has a higher ceiling, but in terms of fit wise and scheme wise.
So I'm trying to think back to what these quarterbacks are used to in terms of wide receivers. And, I'm so used to seeing CJ Stroud with Hall of Fame level receiver talent and like Marvin Harrison, Garrett Williams. And obviously, I know that that's a big claim for both of them. But I think that I've seen Anthony Richardson do a lot more with a lot less, and you guys have a very solid receiving core. So I think that it's a better fit for Anthony because you have more recent experience with Steichen being able to bring Jalen Hurts to the Super Bowl and develop him. So he's used to having the unpolished passer with the legs, and you're also giving Anthony Richardson a better situation for him to thrive in. So good coaching and a better situation. Overall, I think it might be the best fit.
And maybe it's even a scenario, and I don't know where you kind of sit on Anthony Richardson
Yeah.
playing versus sitting year one.
Mm-hmm.
Like it could be a scenario with the Colts now having Gardner Minshew,
Mm-hmm.
where Richardson maybe doesn't feel like he has to. Obviously, it'd be the great scenario if he was ready, but like a lot of people have said, he's just not ready yet. He's just so raw. He's played 13 games in college. He's so raw. He's only going to be 21 by the time the season starts. So there's a lot there to still unlock in Richardson's game. But do you think like he's a guy that you would just want to throw out there like day one here, he's your starter? Or do you think he's a guy where you're like, I think I'm more comfortable kind of easing him along into the season, and when he's ready, giving him a shot at the keys to the franchise?
It really depends on how he looks in OTAs. We saw with Zach Wilson, he was already throwing interceptions and making stupid reads from the get-go. And if they're showing that they're not up to speed yet, I absolutely know that I have a great backup option, a great contingency plan in Gardner Minshew. So I'd want to do that if that's the case. But if Anthony's coming in, he's running the offense smoothly, and maybe he makes a mistake here and there. That's going to happen, especially since you've only played 13 games. Then I think it's a perfectly fine idea as long as you're comfortable putting your job on the line, which I don't have to be worried about that, is just putting him out there. If he's ready, he's ready.
Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, I just didn't know because people are kind of all over the place with Richardson in terms of like, is he ready? Is he not ready? Should the Colts put him out there? All that stuff. So I'm personally more of the just, if he's confident and he's not losing confidence, just give him a shot, man. And if you're bad again, hey, you draft high again and you just continue to build around him. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of Richardson. But anyway, we've talked about quarterback enough. Let's move on to now some other fits. The Colts have 2 picks on day 2, rounds 2 and 3. So the Colts have some needs, obviously, outside of quarterback. I think for me, I would say a couple of those needs in no particular order: cornerback, offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman, wide receiver, and then you could probably throw out a wild card, as an edge rusher or something like that as well. But I really think those are kind of some of the bigger needs. So as far as for you, Alex, here, who are some of your best fits here for Indianapolis? Their picks in the 2nd and 3rd round, pick 35 overall, and then from the Washington Carson Wentz trade, pick 79 overall. What are your thoughts overall on kind of some best fits here for the Colts in some of these positions of need?
So I'll give a couple per each each spot. So at 35, it depends on who's obviously there. So we're projecting because these guys could go earlier. There could be some really good players that fall here. But as of the knowledge right now, I think you could address cornerback. And there's a lot of talk about Keely Ringo. I think that he's been, talked about enough. So there's not really too much need to, go even further into that. Someone who's not really talked about enough is Tyreek Stevenson. So for a while, I mocked him he's a cornerback out of Miami. He's about 6 foot, 200 pounds. He used to be 212. So slimmed down. He's in the 4.4s. Really good run defender, really sticky in man coverage, and he's developing as a zone protector as well. So I think he fits the system very well. I used to mock him to the Dallas Cowboys in my mock drafts before they got Stephon Gilmore. So it's pretty obvious that there was that sort of link in my mind. So maybe that's why I'm drawing that connection there. But big athlete, willing to play against the run as well. And even in the Senior Bowl, he had some amazing reps. He reminds me a little bit of Trevon Diggs in the fact that he might jump the route a little bit. He might try to anticipate a little bit more than he should. But as time goes on, and I think as he's not being trained up by the University of Miami's DB coaches, I think that he'll be able to improve, be a little more strategic, and be a little bit more refined in the times that he does choose to jump the route. And that could be a big payoff, a huge payoff. So that's a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Tyreek Stevenson. He was top 25 on my board starting out the year. He's like 35 right now. So that's for DB. That's where I'm starting there. So at 35, I also want to at least include Osiris Torrance because I'm a big O-line guy. That's just me. I know that there's one primary spot on the interior offensive line that could be fixed, and this class is not very good in terms of the depth at interior offensive line. So I would personally, if he's there, which he could be, because there's some pretty bad mistakes on tape, even though the stats don't say it. Even versus Tennessee, there's a guy named Omari Thomas that nobody ever talked about. Absolutely ate his lunch. So, there are bad reps there. He could be there. And I think that would be an excellent move. If you are going to have someone like Anthony Richardson, also giving him his guard, not really a bad decision. So, yeah, there's already that chemistry there. Those are my two guys for round number 2. You could talk about potentially moving back and getting Jalen Hyatt. He'd be a perfect role for that Paris Campbell role, but I think he could be there in the third. There's a lot of deep threats in this class. Jalen Hyatt had a very, very limited route tree, and he was in an offense that was not very translatable. Could be slipping. So round 3, we talked about this. Center could be a position, like a center guard hybrid also is something that you could value because I love drafting centers and putting them to guard because they have the intellect to play the center role, but then they could also, I think they're pretty damn talented enough to be able to move to guard. So Luke Whippler, not getting enough hype. I have him actually as a top 35 guy on my board as well. Ivan Pace, I know y'all don't need linebacker desperately, but he's also a really good pass rusher and one hell of a competitor. I've seen him in person destroy my SMU Mustangs. This guy in the Senior Bowl leveled a guard that is 100 pounds heavier than him. Wow. He's a dog. So love that. Feel free to chime in if you have any other guys that you want to bring up as well. But I have 3 other sleeper wide receivers after.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a couple names like, a lot of people have talked about Zay Flowers sitting there potentially at 35. Now, I personally don't know if he's going to be there at 35, but a lot of people have said if he is there, I think you run up to the podium, you turn in the card and you don't look back because I think for a lot of people, he's been a big riser the last couple weeks, the last month really or so. So I think he would be a good fit. A guy that the Colts actually just hosted. I want to get your thoughts. I think this is more of if the Colts were to trade back from 35 and acquire maybe another, day 2 pick or something like that. Julius Brents has been a name that a lot of people in the Colts just hosted him as well. What's your overall take on him?
So he is literally the good, the bad, and the ugly, and a little bit more emphasis on the latter 2. I really like Julius Brents. He popped off to me before I ever even knew who he was. I was watching just normal game tape this past year, didn't know his name, and I was like, oh, that corner, he made some really good plays there. But I talked about Tyreek Stevenson being hot and cold, maybe jumping the route a little bit too much. Let's just say Julius Brents can't cover a tight end doing an out route. He got absolutely destroyed by Cam Lawton, who's not even considered a top tight end in this class. And I'm genuinely concerned about him in man coverage. Genuinely concerned. We talk about Keely Ringo getting destroyed versus Ohio State, as majority of corners did. But this was on an embarrassing level. You have to use them in a zone coverage system. I don't think it's a very good fit, but amazing frame, great work ethic, and you do see the explosiveness is there. The tools are there, but maybe not up here. Maybe not the reaction time.
Gotcha. I know there's some other wide receivers potentially that the Colts could be interested in. That could be some sleepers for Indianapolis. The hot name has been Jonathan Mingo right now out of Mississippi. He's a guy that's just an athletic freak. I mean, he's over a 9, he's like a 9.5, maybe a little bit over that in terms of RAS score. And we know Chris Ballard, especially last year, went all in on the RAS score. Pretty much every single player was like an 8 or a 9 or above. So I mean, you just talk about if you get Anthony Richardson, who already is an athletic freak, and you pair him with another very athletic wide receiver, like that kind of combo, and just obviously pairing it with Pittman and pairing it with Alec Pierce, who I think is going to have a better year too. That's just a really good recipe for setting up your young quarterback well. What are your thoughts on him and maybe some other wide receivers? I know Scott out of Cincinnati, Alec Pierce's old teammate, is another option that people seem to like. What are your thoughts on some of these other wide receivers that could be there, maybe round 2, round 3, around that?
Yeah, so Mingo's a fun one. He's obviously built like a rock, very athletic. He's going to be somebody that you want to get the ball in his hands, and he's going to punish the defensive back. They're not going to be as big as him, and they might not even be as fast as him. It'll be very fun, especially when you do little dink and dunks. I have someone who I love. His name's Justin Shorter. He was Anthony Richardson's number 1 wide receiver Instead of being like 6 foot to 6'2" and 230 pounds, he's 6'4", 230. So, you're adding a little bit of height there, and you're adding the familiarity. He's a number one wide receiver coming out of high school of his class. So he already has that raw talent, but there's just been a lot of injuries that have happened that maybe limited his career. But I certainly think that Justin Shorter would be an amazing option as a sleeper. Round three is a little bit early for where I think he will go, even though I think he should go earlier. But day three option, if you really want to get Jonathan Mingo at a fraction of the price, and you get that familiarity, we talked about Cyrus Torrance with Anthony Richardson. Now you could get his buddy Justin Shorter. So you could have that immediate college quarterback to wide receiver connection, and you can get it for a fraction of the price. I love him to death. That's my thing. He used to be in my top 32 before he tested in the 4.5s. That was because I was hoping he'd be in the 4.4s, but his play speed is incredible. It really is. And he's very smooth as a route runner. Just one of those guys where I don't understand why nobody's talking about him. I understand why some aren't, but it's been crickets. And at that frame and at that production level, and that trust that he gained from his quarterback, you don't gain that trust for nothing. He put up some good numbers there. So I love that for him. And then one other guy I want to note is Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. He's a really fun burner. He's one of those guys who can definitely pop off the screen to you. Didn't test as well as maybe you'd hope, but similar to Tyler Scott as well. Didn't really test the way that we were thinking. Maybe we were like, maybe like 4.3 to 4.2 range, testing the 4.4s. So just it was an underwhelming combine season. So maybe take those numbers and just throw them away to watch the tape, because even Tank Dell is incredible. But I think those are some really good options. Tank Dell, you could throw the name in there as well.
Yeah. I was going to ask you as well, like some other day three guys that maybe could be sitting there round 4, round 5, even later. That would be some potential good fits for Indianapolis. Maybe some other needs that aren't necessarily, on everybody's radar. Like I could think like, interior defensive linemen, running back, some of those things. Or if the Colts want to go back and double dip at corner, like that could be another option as well. Are there any guys that like would interest you there if you're in Indianapolis and you're looking, to potentially, maybe not for an immediate 2023 need, maybe looking beyond that 2024, 2025 when some of these contracts are expiring, and you maybe need to trust one of these guys to kind of step into a role? Are there any guys that maybe interest you there in some of those positions?
So there's a guy named Carl Brooks in this draft. He's an awesome player. I have a lot of respect for him. He's 300 pounds. He actually played as an edge rusher, but he's also a flex defensive interior, because who the hell plays at edge at 300 pounds? But he is really, really polished as a hand technician. He's able to swat off people's hands, get off blocks. He does an incredible job at that. He didn't get invited to the combine. He was at the Senior Bowl, did a great job there, didn't get invited to the combine. Blows my mind, blew everybody's mind. But maybe the NFL's not as high on him. They will be once he gets on the field. So if you're asking for like a day three guy who might not step in right now, but might step into a big role later, I think that's a huge name that people aren't really talking about. That could certainly be one of those dudes that's like, oh crap, this guy's incredible. So I love that for sure. Thinking about like maybe corners that could be down there that could step into a role. There's a guy named Starling Thomas out of, I believe, UAB. He's somebody, he tested, I think at one time at a 4.2, 4.40. And like, he's just one of those athletic projects, and maybe won't be able to step in soon, but definitely somebody who could step in more later. This is just not the deepest class, if I'm going to be completely blunt. And finding the guys who could actually fit starting roles later on might be more of a premium than what we've seen before. But I will say one more name. There's the right guard of LSU. I think his name's like Aaron Bradford. He is a mauler in the run game. So if you want to pass on an O lineman early, I have a weird feeling this guy could go third round, because we always see these LSU guards go in the third round. But that is amazing value as well. Very fun to watch.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Now, one question for you, Alex. You don't have to name any more names, but like, if you're the Colts and if you're really any team here drafting in day 3, what do you think is like some of the best position groups that are like going to be deep and are going to have talent there, in those later rounds, and some positions that maybe you're like, you probably should pick a guy a little bit earlier and not really rely on maybe some of the back end guys there sitting there, in the later rounds. What positions would those be?
So I think tight end is a great one. My buddy, well, not my buddy, but someone who I fell in love with years ago against their game against Georgia from Cincinnati as well, Josh Wiley. He was never, ever used properly in college, and he's just somebody who I think should be a top 2 round pick. and just never got the respect or the usage to warrant that. So he's going to be incredible value. You got Davis Allen down there as well. Zach Kuntz, I highly doubt that he'll be a day 3 guy, but you never know. Maybe teams just want to see a little bit more production from him. That's a big stretch. He'll probably be a round 2 to round 3 guy. But those are like some nice targets. You also have Braden Willis from Oklahoma. The Niners love him. That could be one of their compensatory picks because we all know the Niners love to take guys early. So like there are just some really good tight ends that you can find late. So that's a really good option if you, like the Lions, could be looking for somebody to more so compete in a role rather than be a bona fide tight end 1. Other positions of note, you could actually look at linebacker. You do have guys like Servassier Dennis out of Pittsburgh. That's really solid. I don't know if Ivan Pace will go early because he's 5'10", 230 pounds. Could be going a little bit later. D. Winters is a solid dude as well. So the top end talent, there's 3 guys, and there's a big drop off in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of Diane Henley, so you could say top 4 on a drop off. But I think that there's some good value down there. Wide receiver, you might have guys like Xavier Hutchinson down there, Puka Nacua, Justin Shorter. Like those are some of my favorite guys. That's good value as well. But it's kind of a thin class in terms of the back end. It really is. Running back's great though. Running back's where you're just gonna splash. It's tough to see a team spend a top 20 pick on Bijan when you can get somebody who's probably 70% of Bijan's talent level in like the 5th round. And that's probably like Deuce Vaughn. I have Deuce Vaughn graded just the same as Bijan, but that's okay. I love Deuce Vaughn. I'm a little bit biased.
Well, that's interesting because that might actually be a move the Colts to be interested in just because after this year, both their running backs are up for extensions, right? Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor. Now, obviously, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to stay with Indy, but who knows where Zach Moss is going to go? And then all of a sudden, you have a big needed RB2 there. So I think the Colts definitely need to look to potentially go that direction, especially if it is a deep class. I think it would serve them wisely to go after a young running back, and maybe they look at a guy that can kind of maybe fill a little bit more of what Nyheim Hines filled for the Colts for a number of years, more of that receiving back out of the backfield, a guy that can just kind of be used wherever in space. I think that might be a really good option for them as well. But it's going to be interesting, man, to see how this all plays out for the Colts, how this whole first round, all the rounds really, but specifically like the top 4, how those really play out. And then obviously how the other picks play out throughout the course of the season. But thank you, Alex, so much, man, for coming on. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, find your work?
Of course. I own Hail Mary Sports, so you can find me on YouTube. If you guys like draft content, you guys know where to go, but we're going to be adding in fantasy and betting. So it's going to be a lot more fun, and I'm going to actually be doing a stream called Mediocre Madden. So it's going to be a fun series because don't have high expectations for me. I'm just trying to have fun. But if you guys like that, feel free to hop on in.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, be sure to go hit subscribe to him. Where are you at, Alex, right now in terms of the I haven't checked in a little bit.
I am, I believe, at 7,700. So we're pushing to, I know. The last time I came on here, I was like, I think, 5K, 6K? So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, guys, help him to get to 10K, man. That's amazing. I didn't know you were that far.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Guys, be sure to go check him out. Link will be in the description. Alex, man, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Of course. It's always a pleasure being here.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. Really appreciate everybody. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Go check out Alex's channel as well. That'll do it for this one, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.